In the hush of twilight, when myth and memory intertwine, there are names whispered only in the shadows of forgotten scrolls. Names that were never meant to be remembered. Names that were buried, not in the dust of time, but beneath the weight of fear. One such name is Armaros. He was not cast down in rage. He stepped down, willingly. Not with fire, not with violence, but with something far more dangerous, a lesson. You see, Armaros didn't come to destroy mankind. He came to teach us. He whispered secrets not even angels were meant to speak. He gave us the forbidden code, the key to unravel what heaven had sealed. The resolving of enchantments, they called it. But it was more than that. It was the first step toward dismantling divine order itself. He didn't give us swords, he gave us autonomy. And in that gift, we found our rebellion. This is not the story of a monster, it is the story of a teacher, and what happens when the wrong lesson is given too soon. Not all ruin comes through force. Sometimes it arrives in the form of a lesson, brilliant, irresistible, and fatal. The Book of Enoch. In today's episode, we journey into the most unsettling truth buried in ancient scripture. Armaros, the fallen watcher, not as villain, but as the mirror of humanity's thirst for power. And in part 6, we'll confront a question that scholars, mystics, and priests have dared not ask for centuries. Was Armaros truly evil, or was he punished for telling us too much? So stay with us. What you're about to discover may change how you see heaven, sin, and salvation itself. Tell us in the comments, was Armaros a traitor or a tragic teacher? If you're ready to go deeper, type Watcher Truth in the comments right now. Like this video if you believe hidden knowledge should be uncovered. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because what's coming next will rewrite everything you thought you knew.
High above the clouds, where the earth meets the stars, there lies a mountain too ancient for modern maps to remember. Mount Hermon. It is not a place you visit, it is a place that visits you, in dreams, in myths, in warnings passed down through trembling voices. Because something happened there. Something that cracked the boundary between the divine and the damned. Before the flood, before the tablets, even before Eden's exile was fully understood, there were watchers. Celestial beings, not quite like the angels we imagine in white robes and soft wings. They were appointed guardians, sent by God not to rule, but to observe, to watch, to remain apart from us. But watching turned to wanting, wanting turned to longing, and longing gave birth to rebellion. The Book of Enoch tells us this, and they descended upon Mount Hermon in the days of Jared, and they bound themselves together by mutual imprecations. 1 Enoch 6:6. In other words, they made a pact, 200 of them, bound not by divine law, but by desire, and that pact would fracture heaven itself. Armaros was among them, not the leader, no, that title belonged to Semjaza, but Armaros stood at the threshold, willingly stepping across a line no angel was ever meant to cross. They took human wives, they taught forbidden knowledge, and from their unions came giants, Nephilim, creatures too large for the world and too wild for heaven. But long before blood flooded the earth, the real flood was spiritual. The descent on Mount Hermon was not just a fall, it was a reversal. Heaven's appointed watchers became Earth's most dangerous teachers. Why Mount Hermon? Why there? It was no accident. The name Hermon comes from the Semitic root hrum, meaning to ban, to bind, or to curse. It is where sacred things are broken, where boundaries, once meant to protect, are shattered by those who should have known better. Hermon became the anti-Sinai. While Sinai gave us the law, Hermon gave us defiance. While Moses received commandments, the Watchers gave corruption. It was the mountain of the first betrayal, and unlike other betrayals, this one was intimate. It wasn't driven by hatred, it was driven by love, or at least the illusion of it. Desire clothed itself as compassion, curiosity wore the mask of wisdom, and the Watchers convinced themselves they were giving us gifts. But they weren't gifts. They were accelerants. And Armaros, he was the quiet spark. Today, Mount Hermon still stands, silent, unmoved, towering over the border between Syria, Lebanon, and Israel, covered in snow, but burning in memory. Tourists pass it, hikers climb it, but few know what once descended from its peaks, and fewer still ask, what exactly did Armaros bring down with him, other than himself? Because in the next part of our journey, we'll open the scrolls he whispered from and examine the gift he gave humanity, the power to unravel heaven itself.
What if the most dangerous spell is the one that teaches you how to break every other spell? What if the truest curse is knowing too much? Among the 200 Watchers who descended upon Mount Hermon, many taught humanity forbidden skills, sorcery, metalworking, astrology, cosmetics, tools of war, vanity, control. But Armaros taught something different. He taught how to undo those very forces. Resolving of enchantments. That's what the ancient Book of Enoch says. At first glance, it almost seems harmless, maybe even helpful. But look closer, and you'll see a far more profound danger. In ancient cultures, an enchantment wasn't just a spell cast in the dark by a witch over a bubbling cauldron. It was a spiritual lock, a protective order set in place by heaven itself. To resolve an enchantment meant to reverse that divine code, to unravel spiritual safeguards, to trespass behind the veil of reality. Think of it like this. If creation is like sacred architecture, with every word, every force, and every boundary designed with intention, then Armaros didn't hand humanity the blueprints. He handed us the eraser. Imagine giving a child the ability to rewire electricity, but not the maturity to understand fire. That's what Armaros did. He gave us insight without wisdom, access without accountability, power without humility. And with that one lesson, the world began to change. Some scholars compare Armaros to Prometheus, the Greek titan who stole fire from the gods and gave it to man. But fire, at least, is visible, tangible, manageable. Armaros gave us something worse, the ability to break spiritual laws without understanding them, to tear down protections before we ever understood why they were placed. And unlike Prometheus, who was often seen as a liberator, Armaros is remembered as a corrupter, because he didn't bring light, he brought permission. The resolving of enchantments may have started as a secret knowledge passed between watchers and their human lovers, but over generations, it evolved. It became the root of sorcery, occultism, and ceremonial magic. It whispered into the ears of mystics and manipulators alike. It birthed systems where symbols, names, and words were no longer holy, but weapons. Today, we still see echoes of it in the obsession with hacking reality, rewriting identity, manifesting destiny, controlling unseen forces. From the New Age movement to digital technocracy, we still chase Armaros' gift, but rarely ask, should we? The true danger wasn't just what he taught. It was that he taught it too soon. Before we were ready, before we had the capacity to choose reverence over recklessness. You see, some knowledge is weight, and when carried by unready hands, it becomes ruin. He whispered secrets, he opened minds, he showed mankind how to dismantle the sacred codes. Anonymous fragment, Book of the Watcher's tradition. And so the question remains, if Armaros gave us the eraser, who taught us how to draw again? Or did no one ever come to clean up the damage? In the next chapter, we'll follow this archetype of the fallen teacher through myth, magic, and religion, from Lucifer to Prometheus, to see why Armaros may be the most misunderstood villain in human history.
What if the devil came not with horns and fire, but with a scroll in his hand and a gentle voice saying, "Let me show you how the world really works"? What if the greatest danger wasn't hatred, but mentorship? Across time and culture, there's an archetype that refuses to disappear: the forbidden teacher. A being of immense knowledge who crosses divine boundaries to share it with those deemed not ready. We see this figure again and again. In Greece, it was Prometheus who defied Zeus and gave fire to mankind. In Mesopotamia, it was Enki, the trickster god, who flooded the world with wisdom against the will of the high gods. In Gnostic traditions, it was Sophia who released divine sparks into a broken world. In Christian lore, it was Lucifer, the light-bearer, who fell not because he hated God, but because he wanted to rise above his place. And in the Book of Enoch, it was Armaros. Not a warrior, not a tyrant, but a tutor. He didn't rage against heaven. He simply whispered secrets to those who weren't meant to hear them. That's what makes him so unsettling, because we don't fear him the way we fear monsters or armies. We fear him because we recognize him. How many times in history have we praised the teacher who liberated us, only to curse them when the freedom became unbearable? It's a pattern as old as myth. The teacher offers insight. The insight unlocks power. The power invites corruption. The teacher becomes the scapegoat. The line between wisdom and heresy is often written in fire. Fragment from early Gnostic commentary, 2nd century. During the Renaissance, as Europe rediscovered ancient texts, figures like Armaros were reimagined not as demons, but as dignified spirits. In grimoires like the Ars Goetia, spirits claiming to teach all sciences and secret things were summoned not for destruction, but for illumination. They offered geometry, philosophy, astronomy, and yes, magic. To some, these beings were fallen angels. To others, they were unjustly condemned teachers. Sound familiar? Even today, this archetype lives on. In literature, in cinema, in politics, the mysterious professor, the rogue scientist,
the visionary who sees what others refuse to see, who risks everything to share it. Sometimes they're remembered as heroes, other times as villains. It's not just theology, it's psychology. Armaros doesn't only haunt our scriptures, he haunts our shadow, the part of ourselves that wants to know more, even if it costs us everything. So was Armaros trying to corrupt mankind, or was he trying to awaken us? Maybe the truth lies not in his actions, but in our reaction to them. Because every great teacher forces a choice. Will you use what you learn to build or to break? And that leads us to the ripple effect, because once the lesson is given, it can never be taken back. The watchers were bound, their voices silenced, but the knowledge they shared spread like wildfire. So, what happened when that knowledge entered the bloodstream of history? What did it become when kings and magicians, mystics, and madmen got their hands on it? In the next part, we'll trace Armaros's forbidden legacy through the ages, into Babylon, Egypt, Europe, and even into the world we live in today.
What happens to a fallen angel's voice after he's been silenced? What happens to a forbidden lesson when it's no longer forbidden? They say the watchers were bound, imprisoned in darkness, sealed beneath the earth. The archangel Raphael was dispatched with chains forged by divine authority. Justice was swift. Heaven would not allow such treason to go unanswered. But knowledge has no chains. You can lock up a being. You cannot lock up an idea. The Book of Enoch tells us that Armaros and his brothers were judged, buried beneath jagged mountains, their mouths closed by angelic force. But what they taught survived. It passed through whispers, rituals, dreams. It embedded itself not in scrolls, but in the soul of human curiosity. And it echoed. In the ancient myths of ancient Babylon, we find the Apkallu, semi-divine sages who brought forbidden knowledge to early humanity and were later cast into the abyss for their pride. In Egypt, the god Thoth was said to have written a book containing the secrets of the universe, a book so dangerous it was hidden for generations, because anyone who read it would gain power over gods and men. In ancient Jewish mysticism, the Sefer Raziel contains celestial secrets, said to be handed down from angels who walked the earth before the flood. Different names, different languages, but the same echo. Even the Testament of Solomon, a later Jewish text, describes spirits who once served heaven but now operate in shadows, offering wisdom, protection, and power in exchange for allegiance. Sound familiar? This is the legacy of Armaros, a knowledge too tempting to destroy, too dangerous to embrace. Fast forward to the Middle Ages. In the grimoires of Europe, the Key of Solomon, the Lemegeton, the Ars Goetia, we meet spirits whose descriptions are eerily similar. They do not arrive with horns or brimstone. They come as tutors. They claim to teach geometry, astronomy, linguistics, logic, alchemy. They promise to unlock mysteries of the stars, of time, of transformation. And in exchange, they ask for nothing more than attention, obedience, allegiance. During the Renaissance, these spirits were recast once again, not as evil, but as gatekeepers of ancient truth. Thinkers like Giordano Bruno and John Dee believed that ancient wisdom had been buried and that divine secrets could be recovered not through faith alone, but through calculation, invocation, and daring. They weren't trying to serve demons. They were trying to resurrect what the church had buried. And Armaros, whether named or unnamed, stood behind them, his legacy pulsing through their pursuits.
Even now, in our modern world of artificial intelligence, quantum computing, and spiritual self-help, the echo remains. We build machines that speak like gods. We decode genomes. We manifest realities through intention. We are still trying to resolve enchantments. Still chasing that same whisper Armaros gave long ago. You can control what you were meant to revere. But here's the question. Did we ever stop to ask where that whisper is leading us? Because the legacy of Armaros isn't just about what was taught, it's about what was unleashed. And now that the knowledge is everywhere, woven into culture, science, magic, ambition, can it ever be called forbidden again? Or have we simply normalized the fall? In the next part, we'll confront the real cost of Armaros' gift and explore how spiritual autonomy can become spiritual arrogance when the student forgets why the teacher fell.
What if the serpent in Eden didn't lie? What if the real danger wasn't disobedience, but independence? The legacy of Armaros didn't end in ancient scrolls or secret grimoires. It lives on, in our hunger to know, to control, to transcend. He gave humanity more than forbidden knowledge. He gave us the idea that we could walk without God, that we didn't need to wait, that we didn't need to ask, that the divine spark was already within us, and we could fan it into flame by our own will. It sounds empowering, but is it? From the beginning, Armaros' gift was framed as liberation. He didn't enslave, he opened eyes. He didn't demand worship, he offered tools. Spiritual autonomy, but autonomy without reverence easily mutates into arrogance. And that's where the danger lives. The more we untie ourselves from higher authority, the more we believe we are the authority. We become self-initiated gods in our own image. We declare our truth, our path, our design. And suddenly, sacred mystery is reduced to personal algorithm. Divine revelation becomes content. Worship becomes manifestation. Obedience becomes obsolete. This is not just about ancient angels or theological theory. It's about now. Because we live in an age where self is sacred, where we are taught to trust inner knowing over tradition, to deconstruct everything, to resolve enchantments, until nothing holy remains but us. Armaros would be proud or terrified. In theology, the fall of man was not a fall into violence, it was a fall into self-rule. Eve didn't steal a weapon, she reached for wisdom. When man seeks to be like God, he forgets how to be human. St. Augustine, City of God. That's the tragedy, because spiritual autonomy is not evil, but spiritual arrogance, that's where the serpent smiles. Even in modern spiritual movements, New Age, ceremonial magic, even some tech philosophies, there's a quiet echo of Armaros. You are divine. You are unlimited. You are the creator. And while that message can empower, it can also corrupt if it divorces power from responsibility. The truth is, not everything we can access we're ready to handle. Not every door is meant to be opened by human hands, and not every light leads to life. So now the question returns not to the ancient watchers, but to us. What will we do with this inheritance? We are no longer students. We are the keepers now, the magicians, the mystics, the manifestors. But do we carry Armaros' knowledge with humility, or are we walking the same path that led him into chains? Because in the final part of this journey, we'll confront the hardest question of all. Was Armaros really evil, or simply a reflection of the part of us that wants to touch heaven before we're ready to hold it?
What if the greatest evil was simply a question asked too early? What if the sin wasn't rebellion, but curiosity? We've been taught to fear the devil as the great deceiver, the enemy of God, the serpent of Eden. But the Bible never names him Lucifer. That title came later, filtered through Latin translations and theological layers. And even then, the word Lucifer meant something different. Light bearer, a bringer of illumination, not of fire, not of death, but of awareness. Lucifer fell for pride. Armaros fell for sharing. One tried to ascend beyond his station. The other stooped low enough to hand truth to mortals. And for that, they were both cast out. The more we compare them, the more they start to mirror each other. Both were close to the divine. Both crossed boundaries. Both offered knowledge. And both were punished, not for violence, but for giving too much too soon. It begs the question, was Armaros really evil? Or was he a reflection of us? Because when we look at Armaros, we don't see a beast. We see something far more uncomfortable. We see a teacher, a being who looked at humanity not with disdain, but perhaps with empathy. And in his whisper, we find the same temptation that has echoed through every age. You can know. You can control. You can be like the divine. It's the same echo that lured Eve, that seduced mystics, that animates Silicon Valley, that haunts every soul who's ever asked, why not me? But there's always a cost, because some light burns too hot. Some insight doesn't liberate, it disorients. Some truths require preparation, reverence, restraint. And when they're handed over too easily, they don't elevate us, they unravel us. That's the tragedy of Armaros. He didn't destroy humanity. He gave it a choice. And once that choice was made, once that sacred fire passed from angel to man, there was no turning back. The divine order would never be the same. In some occult texts, spirits like Armaros are framed not as demons, but as misunderstood figures, beings of knowledge who were punished unjustly. Some even claim they are morally neutral, that their punishment was political, that heaven feared a world where humanity was to awake. But traditional theology sees it differently. It views Armaros as a traitor, not because he hated God, but because he trusted humans with what they couldn't carry. And maybe that's the worst betrayal of all. So what does this mean for us now? In a world where knowledge is infinite, where power is accessible, where we chase secrets and bend laws and unlock spiritual doors just to see what's on the other side, are we not becoming Armaros' legacy made flesh? Are we not the living continuation of that ancient pact? And if so, are we ready to face the price? He whispered secrets. He opened minds. He showed mankind how to dismantle the sacred codes. Book of the Watchers, 1 Enoch. Maybe Armaros wasn't cast out because he was evil. Maybe he was cast out because he reminded heaven too much of what we were becoming. So we leave you with this final question. Do you carry the light to illuminate or to burn? Because in every age, the line between salvation and destruction has never been drawn in fire or stone, but in the choice of what we do with what we know.
So now you've heard the story, not just of a fallen angel, but of a teacher, a whisperer of truths, a light bearer who handed us the tools to shape the world and maybe to shatter it. Armaros didn't come with swords. He didn't command armies. He gave us something far more powerful, the ability to choose, to obey or to explore, to submit or to understand, to stay in Eden or reach beyond it. But with every sacred choice comes a sacred cost. And now you carry that weight. Because the question is no longer about Armaros. It's about us, about you. What will you do with the light he left behind? Will you use it to heal, to awaken, or to control? Will you resolve enchantments, or unravel what was never meant to be touched? Let us know in the comments. Do you believe Armaros was a traitor or a tragic teacher? Type "Watcher Truth" if you stayed with us all the way. Like this video if it made you think. Pin subscribe and turn on notifications because this is only the beginning. In the next episode, we'll follow the trail of another fallen one. Not the Whisperer, but the Forger. The angel who gave us weapons and taught us to kill like gods. His name was Azazel, and his fire still burns. We'll see you there.